Good afternoon guys, Dark Purple Shadow here. Today I'm talking about a game that I featured in a lot of my random kind of rants. I play this game a lot. I've been playing it quite consistently. I've recently gotten back into it, and the game I'm talking about is Nioh 2. Now this is genuinely one of my favorite games of all time. This game and its kind of pre-runner called Nioh 1, amazing games. I have nothing but good things to say about them outside of a few kind of minor issues which are more to do with the quality of life, not really to the game itself. Nioh 2 is an interesting game. It's a bit like a mix of Elden Ring and Doom. You know, you get katanas instead of guns, and it's a bit rooted in Japanese culture rather than some sort of weird demonic space creatures of the future. And it's built around some of the most satisfying combat I've ever come across. It's clean, crisp, and when you're doing it right, it feels like you're slicing through butter with a samurai sword yourself. So what is it? It's a Souls-like, but it's quite interesting. The combat is fast, complex, and rewarding. You play as a half demon warrior battling yokai, which are basically Japanese demons and spirits and all that kind of stuff, and it's set in historical Japan, late medieval era, early Renaissance, called the Sengoku period. Think about Samurai Dark Souls meets Diablo Loot with like Street Fighter combat or Devil May Cry combat speed, something like that. If you know about anything about this game, you know that there was a prequel called Nioh 1. It's not really a prequel, it was the original game. Nioh 1 was a good game. It was unpolished, it was probably harder than this one. It was less developed, it was less mature, but it was amazing. I played Nioh 1 straight after graduating. The summer of post-graduation, I played that game, and honestly, I still remember my playthrough. I played it quite quickly, and it was a cohesive story. The lore was amazing, and the combat was very similar to Nioh 2, albeit a bit more clunky and a few differences. I'm not going to go into what those differences are. This is not a conversation about that game. It's telling you it exists. Give it a go if you want to. But I'd recommend just jumping straight in with Nioh 2. Now, if you're going to jump into Nioh 2, it's not the story that's going to make you play the game. The story is, it exists, and that's as far as I'll go. It's about as good as Elden Ring story, maybe worse, which is a difficult thing to do. So yeah, just treat it as kind of atmosphere, you know, something extra to think about, but don't ever like look into it as, yeah, I'm playing this game to figure out what happens at the end. It's not that deep. Okay, now let's get into the most important part of this game, which is the combat and the mechanics of combat. To put it simply, it's one of the most beautiful combat systems I've played in. You've got multiple stances, stamina management, you've got yokai abilities, magic, ninja tools, and an insane variety of weapons. You can pretty much do whatever you want, and everything is sort of viable. Obviously, certain builds are better than others. There is a meta. But you can ignore that and you can pretty much complete the whole base game and probably New Game 1 and New Game 2. I personally stuck to a weapon called Odachi, which is a long range kind of two-handed katana. I also use the fists, which is almost a complementary weapon, which is kind of short range, in and out, basically knuckle dusters. And you have one of the highest DPSs in the game with those, but obviously you're at a very short range and it's a bit more risky and you can get knocked down a bit more. There's something for everyone. If you want to play kind of hybrid, you want to be like a bit of a ninja kind of guy, you got nunchucks or something equivalent to that. You've got kind of a glaive, you've got a katana. Regular katana is really fun as well. I wouldn't mind playing with that actually, because it's really crisp and smooth. There is a similar option to Elden Ring in the parry kind of system. It's very different. It's called a burst counter, but I'd say it's better. In terms of boss design, they're all pretty fair. They telegraph their attacks, they teach you as you kill them, and obviously that's the best thing about these bosses. They just look amazing. They look very scary, intimidating, Lovecraftian, horrible in the best way possible, and you enjoy killing them and slaying them, and that is something which is rare. Killing evil is perhaps the most satisfying thing in this game. You kill demons, absolute demons, using your own demonic powers. What more do you want? And my two favorite bosses are, there's a serpent early on, which is like a poisonous giant snake dragon thing, and then there is also a fire giant called Enanra, and he's very interesting to kill as well. Very crisp combat. It's the standard kind of DPS dodge, whittle him down, finish him off, find openings, you know, very clean combat. Now this is where I'm going to talk about a bit more of the complicated stuff around this game, some of the places where I think quality of life starts to become an issue, and that is around build crafting and loot. As you get further and further, more and more of the stuff you find is basically junk. But if you're willing to do your homework, you can put together some absolutely amazing builds, but like I said, if you're willing to do your homework. Otherwise, you're kind of stuck with just the generic kind of weapons, and you're looking at power-ups and this, that, and the other, and it's very confusing, and you level up very quickly, and you get access to more powerful weapons relatively quickly. So, you know, your builds are going to be very, very fluid, and I'll put it like that. It is kind of a bit, you lose a bit of satisfaction sometimes, but it's still fun. It's part of the game. You can also do something called armor reskinning, where any armor can look like another armor. So that's really, really good if you don't want to look like an ugly noob with ugly noob armor. Very, very helpful. I really enjoy that. I use it all the time, and it's not very expensive. At least it doesn't need to make you pay to buy a skin or something, you know, as they're going to do in most future games. I mean, not these guys, but just in general. So in terms of difficulty, it definitely starts off more difficult than any other Souls game I've played, but as you get further in, you get a bit more overpowered. You become kind of like amazingly strong, like very, very, very resilient and high DPS, and you just get better at the game, so it becomes a bit more easier. Things become a bit more predictable. You learn to manage your stamina better. You learn to something called key post more, which is basically you kind of retrieve your stamina after doing a combo by pressing one of the buttons at the back very quickly. And yeah, I mean, difficulty wise, it's hard, but it's doable if you are smart about it and you've got a lot of tools at your disposal to make it even easier. Now, there is a level where some of the maps are quite frustrating, and I'm going to get to that now. Level design is terrible. It's probably the weakest part of this game. You're constantly stuck in a maze. It's very difficult to know which path you need to take, and sometimes it's hard to see the logic behind the game designer's kind of philosophy when it comes to designing a level. You can very easily be one shot by enemies sometimes, in the sense that the regular mobs. So if you get one shot by an enemy around the corner, or like just absolutely KO'd towards the end of it when you're nearing a checkpoint, it's very frustrating. But I think that's a general problem with Souls-likes, but obviously in Nioh it's amplified. Nioh 2 is amplified because the level design is so weak, and I would say of all the weaknesses of this game, that's probably the biggest one. But hopefully, you know, you can look past that and just realize there's a lot more this game has to offer. In terms of performance on PC, perfect. Ran perfectly on my GTX 1080, runs perfectly on my GTX 5080, 1440p, max settings, no problems, 60 Hz locked, not an issue. You can't go past 60 Hz without some sort of fiddling with the game files, but honestly, you're fine at 60 Hz, you know, it's not the end of the world. My final thoughts are, if you're into a game like this, just go for it. Honestly, the looting system, leveling is confusing, I'll give you that, but the loot system, getting those rare weapons, just building up your character, getting better at the game, becoming more fluid, becoming more powerful. It's one of the few games that really actively encourages skill expression, and that's rare these days. And in terms of, you know, the breadth and the beauty and majesty of it, it's nowhere near Elden Ring. I'm not going to say it is, but there's something cozy and profound about it, and you learn a decent amount about Japanese mythology as well. And some of the monsters are just so ugly, you just enjoy killing them. You know, I can't say more than that. It's very satisfying, and I really like the way the numbers kind of pop out and the hit markers change depending on what element you're using. Little things like that really make me enjoy this game. Honestly, it's kind of like low-key a perfect game that you mentally envision. And if they made a version of this which was more kind of European medieval based, and you know, they had more builds, this, that and the other, oh, that would be amazing, like a co-op kind of. But you know, but for what it is, it's very close to perfection for me. Obviously there are issues, quality of life, inventory management, lots of junk loot. The difficulty bumps are very random, especially at the start. It's super hard for no reason. You just don't have any, but I guess you're super weak at that point. You haven't unlocked much. But yeah, it's fun. RPG design is great. As with anything, it has its flaws, but overall for me, it's a solid 9 out of 10. It's a game that I'm going to still play, and I really hope with the new announcement of Nioh 3, they manage to improve this, and then I can be happily giving it a 10 out of 10. Nioh 3, I hope you're a 10 out of 10. From what I've seen, it's promising. I'm not a big fan of some of the stuff in Nioh 3 so far, but the level design, it seems to be revamped, and that's more than I can ask for. But otherwise, peace, and please make sure to give Nioh a chance if you haven't yet. It's an amazing game and it deserves your love.